Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Jim, to you and your family, congratulations. For those of us who know Frank Brown very well, to say that he is structured in the way he approaches everything life would be an understatement. So in that frame of reference, my remarks on Frank Brown are in three parts. But to start, and I'm sure he will tell you when he gets up here, he could not be more thrilled, more happy, more excited, more honored, more humble, and from my standpoint, could not be more deserving to receive the Elmer Ferguson Award. So, part one. We all want to know more about Frank, the person. First of all, he loves his family more than anything. He loves his wife, Nancy, who has literally changed his life, and he could not be more excited about his role as father and grandfather. But not only has Nancy changed his life, Frank basically redefined himself midlife. He took up golf in his 40s, having never played before, other than perhaps miniature golf, and knowing Frank does nothing halfway, became completely obsessed with the game. Also in his 40s, Frank went to his first Bruce Springsteen concert and again got hooked and got obsessed. He has been since then to at least 100 concerts, and as a testament to that, he became friendly with Max Weinberg, the E Street Band drummer, and in fact most of the Weinbergs are here, although Max is working today, so welcome. Again in midlife, having never been to a gym except perhaps to interview a player, he started running and got hooked and obsessed and ran the New York City Marathon. And it's clear to everyone who knows him, Frank can be obsessive to say the least, but he puts his heart and soul into everything he does, which is why he's so good both personally and professionally. Part two. Frank started watching hockey in 1965, and by the time he retired from the NHL, he had watched, written about, or worked for the NHL for at least half of our history. He started writing in 1970 and got paid $50 for his first story. He worked with, competed with, or was a contemporary of 42 of the 60 other Elmer Ferguson honorees, and he covered 60 of the players who were voted to the top 100 players during our centennial. And while he missed Frank Calder and Red Dutton, he did cover Clarence Campbell, John Ziegler, and me, and more about that in part three. Nobody knew or knows the game better, whether it was the players, rules, statistics, history, off-ice personnel, or storylines. Frank lived it, breathed it, and was an expert at it. Nobody could better capture the essence of a game in a 750-word story. Nobody could better create an illuminating angle in a story in 750 words than Frank. He obsessively used, he should have patented it, his spiraled four-color pen scorebook. And again, true to form, there was no game that he would cover if he wasn't wearing a coat and tie. I don't even wear a coat and tie to every game. There was no game that he would not re-watch into the night if he felt he could get more out of it to put in a story or create a new storyline. He was the newspaper voice of hockey in the New York area for 2 decades, and with all due respect to the current hockey writers in New York, he possessed an authority and a clout that has never been equaled. He was also the chronicler of the 1980 Miracle on Ice team, the U.S. Olympic team, and he virtually became a member of the Herb Brooks family. He could be biting, he could be annoying, and if you were his target, you sometimes were not very happy about it, and he certainly had a way with words. 3 examples come to mind. before Game 7 of the 1994 Stanley Cup Final. He was covering the Rangers and writing for the Daily News. He wrote, and I quote, "The Rangers will be the biggest bunch of choking dogs or the most memorable group of players ever assembled." Another example, choking dogs, not something you generally see in the newspapers, but that is topped by what I'm about to tell you. When the Minnesota Wild announced the name for their expansion team, he actually wrote in the Daily News, it actually got published, what was the second choice? The steaming turd? I also remember we had done, and it was in his latter days at the Daily News, and perhaps it was one of the times I decided we needed to change his profession. We had run an advertisement for Budweiser, who was our sponsor, and in a tiny, tiny back of the footage we used was an official who you could barely make out, who once was treated for a drinking problem, and he went off on us in a column, and I remember having a phone conversation with him when I was driving, and we were literally screaming at each other because he could be nitpicky, he could be maddening, he wouldn't give an inch in an argument, but nevertheless, I did ask him to join the league because I knew how good he was at his craft. Part 3. For 20 years, Frank traveled with me, wrote for me, made me smarter about things I never even thought about. He could come up with an angle for a speech or a release that was insightful, that was novel, that was creative. There wasn't a sentence that he couldn't edit to be better. Of course, he terrorized and demoralized a number of junior NHL staffers with his edits. I would occasionally try to edit him to see if I could make him crazy, and he would never hesitate to edit me. He switched his 4 pens to 4-color markers. That was an upgrade. And he was amazing and compulsive about filling his daily planner. As I got older and needed reading glasses, he always made sure that whatever he gave me was in Arial font and either 22 or 24-point type. He could be surly. He was frequently quoted when asked by the media for a comment as saying, quote, "When we have a comment, we will make it," close quote. But through it all, he was my conscience and the conscience of the league, and he always made sure that we were at our best. For that and everything else, Frank, you have given to the game. I and we thank you. I am proud of the time that we worked together. I appreciate you, and I'm proud to call you my friend. I am also relieved that your decades at the league office were not held against you in being named the recipient of this great honor. In short, there is no one more deserving of the Elmer Ferguson Award. So Frank Brown, come get your Elmer Ferguson.
Thank you, Gary. It was a blessing to have one career in hockey. It is mind-boggling to have had 2. I spent nearly 3 decades writing about the greatest game in the world, and then was privileged to spend 20 years working with Gary Bettman and Bill Daly and the many people who have lifted hockey to the heights it has reached. I'm delighted that so many of my NHL colleagues and friends are here today. In 1938, halfway through his 70-year sports writing career, Elmer Ferguson wrote, 35 or 40 years in sport, a long stretch, but I wouldn't swap it for anybody's life. I feel the same way. When my first hockey story was published in 1970 and I held that copy of the Rangers game program in my hands, I said, this is the ultimate thrill. When I got paid for the piece, when that $50 check arrived in the mail, I thought it was all the money in the world. When I joined the sports staff at the Associated Press in 1973 at age 21, I said, this is the ultimate for a sports writer. When I covered the Miracle on Ice at Lake Placid in 1980, I said, this is the ultimate for an American hockey writer. Later that year, when I was hired by the New York Daily News, I said, this is the ultimate for a New York sports fan. And when I covered the New York Rangers Stanley Cup triumph in 1994, I said, this has to be the ultimate. It doesn't get any better than this for a New York kid who delivered pizzas and saved his tips to buy a Rangers season ticket for $100 in 1969. That end mezzanine seat was a mile away from the ice, and I didn't mind at all. I was a lifetime away from imagining that I would even meet the chief executive of the National Hockey League, much less have the chance to work with him, much less have the honor of being introduced by him today. So it turns out, this is the ultimate. For a member of the Pro Hockey Writers Association, this blazer is our green jacket. It's our master's triumph. This plaque is our banner in the rafters, a permanent seat in the most hallowed press box in hockey. I'm overwhelmed that the Pro Hockey Writers Association has chosen to link my name with those of Russ Conway, Mark Dufoy, Eric Duhatchek, Red Fisher, Jim Matheson, Ben Olin, Bob Verdi, and so many others, including Elmer Whitfield Ferguson. Elmer was born in 1885 when Canada was just 17 years past Confederation. Indoor ice hockey, organized under the rules developed by James Creighton, was not yet 10 years old. Lord Stanley was still in England. He was 3 years away from the start of his posting as Governor General of Canada and 7 years away from donating the Championship Cup with which we were all so familiar. During World War I, Elmer covered the birth of the National Hockey League, which, he wrote, quote, was organized in 1917 while the guns were booming their lethal fury in France. In 1938, Montreal Canadiens president Ernest Savard wrote, it seems that as long as we can remember, the last word on any phase of sport has not been said until we have read what Fergie has to say. So you can imagine my excitement when a few months ago, at the Doc Seaman Hockey Research Center here in Toronto, the Hall of Fame's Craig Campbell put me in the same room with Elmer Ferguson's typewriter. It was a Smith Corona Sterling model, circa 1947. It was impossibly heavy, nearly 12 pounds. Touching it literally connected me to a time warp through the decades, to Elmer's era, to so much hockey history, to so many incredible sporting moments that I literally got chills. I bought a 1947 Sterling on eBay, and I tried to type one of Elmer's columns on it, right-handed, because due to a childhood injury, Elmer couldn't open the fingers of his left hand. Of course, virtually all of us type on our phones with two thumbs today, but I can certify that trying to experience what Elmer experienced, typing exclusively with my right index finger on that ancient Smith Corona, gave me a far deeper appreciation for Elmer's work and for the award that bears his name. For more than 50 years, the immortal Red Fisher was one of the most prominent writers in hockey. Red, in his memoir, wrote that his first connection with the excitement of hockey writing was through Elmer Ferguson's word pictures. Red Fisher's retired PHWA card is number 1. When the association was formed in 1967, originally as the National Hockey League Writers Association, Elmer was assigned number 14. I look at my retired card number 19, and I get goosebumps that my number is so near theirs. I never met Elmer, but I knew Red Fisher well. One of the highest compliments I've ever received came when Red said he would hire me to write hockey in Montreal if I ever felt like moving north. It fills me with awe to connect through Red to Elmer, to reach the generations of hockey fans we were privileged to entertain and inform. I miss Red every day. I miss Russ Conway, who called me right after the announcement last May and told me how much he was looking forward to being here today. I miss Jim Gregory, always a ray of hockey sunshine, a giant in the hockey community, and a towering presence during Hall of Fame hockey weekend. I reflect often on the passing of Jason Botchford, who meant so much to his audience. I honor their contributions and their memories, which only heightens my gratitude to those who are here today, starting with my darling, brilliant, and enduringly patient wife, Nancy, who deserves a plaque of her own. Marrying her, now that was the ultimate. Hockey brings families together, and I'm thrilled that members of my family have traveled here. My sister Beth, my cousin Sarah, my brother and sister-in-law Dave and Deb Reich, our son and daughter-in-law Gordon and Sarah, their children, our grandchildren, Grayson and Eva. Hockey sparks lifelong friendships, and I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Richard Hockenberg, who introduced me to the game when we were schoolmates in the 1960s. Rick is here with his wife, Flora. I'm honored that dear friends have traveled here, thanks to Howard Wright and to all the Weinbergs for being here today. Thank you also to Kelly Massey and Craig Campbell of the Hockey Hall of Fame, who have been truly wonderful and welcoming. Thanks to my mentors, Hal Bach, Stan Fischler, and to the late, great John Halligan, who gave me that $50 assignment nearly 50 years ago. In 1938, over his energetic protests, Elmer Ferguson was honored with a special section in which the Montreal Herald celebrated his first 35 years in journalism. Elmer wasn't pleased at all with the timing. "Everyone will think I'm an old mug, broken down and ready to go into the proofreading department," he wrote. And anyway, who cares about a sports writer's career? I'm so glad that Red Fisher and Clarence Campbell combined to answer that question in 1984, 12 years after Elmer's passing, by working to secure Hall of Fame recognition for members of the media. I accept the Elmer Ferguson Memorial Award with profound appreciation, and I congratulate Jim Hewson on his Foster Hewitt Memorial Award. Congrats as well to Ken Lowe. I covered that Edmonton dynasty, and I dealt with Ken a lot, and I'm thrilled that you're being honored today. Fred Shiro once said, "Life is a place where we spend time between games." And for a long time, those wise words summarized my thoughts. I spent a lot of years thinking I had given my life to the game. This honor has helped me realize that hockey has given so much of my life to me. I count my blessings every day. I know how much fun I had. I know how lucky I am. I know how proud my parents would be. It was remarkable to see my words in print even once. It was amazing to see my photo on a column in New York's top-selling tabloid, and it is astonishing to see my plaque in place forever in the Hockey Hall of Fame. For that hat trick of ultimates, I am grateful beyond words. I thank you all for sharing this monumental moment in my life.